Welcome everyone. This is Shivendra. I'm Director Asia Pacific for IAB Tech Lab. We'll just wait a couple of more minutes for people to join in. Just hang on there. This is 1 year. I think everybody's waiting for it to pass. I don't think most people are just among all the years. So welcome everyone again. I am Shivan. I am Director Asia Pacific for IAB Tech Lab. Uh, This is the second of our three-part webinar series, which we are exclusively holding for our Asia Pacific audience. The objective of these three webinars are to kind of introduce you IAB Tech Lab to this audience. The objective is to kind of give you an overview of what IAB Tech Lab does, take you through our areas of work, the kind of assets that we have, and also at the end, we will, bring in one of our members to talk about our relationship or how you can benefit with IAB Tech Lab. Let me start introducing you with the esteemed panel today. So today, okay, I am Shivan, as I just introduced myself. We have Shelly. Shelly is the Vice President, Products and Global Programs. And we have Mike Midden, who is our Director for Product Experiences, and Amit Shetty, who is a Senior Director, Products for Programmatic and Brand Safety. Let me now take you to what we are trying to cover today. So for today's topics, we are covering basically today the cross screen delivery of advertisement, and of which the mobile part Shelly will cover, and which is the MRAID and other stuff. The video, WAST and VPAID, Mike would cover, and then we will come back to Shelly to talk about Open Measurement SDK, and podcast measurement would be covered again by Mike, and then we will also talk a bit of iOS attribution SCAD networks by Amit. Towards the end, we'll talk with Amit. We'll talk with Kiranjit Purba. To introduce you to Kiranjit, Kiranjit is the director at Promogo. He's the vice president vehicle monetization at Gojek. He has been an IAB Tech Lab member for long, and they have recently, implemented Open Measurement SDK. Kiran would be joining us a bit late. He has some exigencies, but we are looking forward eagerly to hear from him. Over to you, Shelly. This is the first part of the introduction, which we have kind of done even last time, but this is just for the first timers to take you through what IAB stands for, IAB Tech Lab stands for. Over to you, Shelly.
Thank you, Shavin. Welcome, everyone, and nice to see you here. I will walk you through a quick, brief overview of what Tech Lab is, what we do, and how we drive the technology standards to drive growth and trust for digital advertising globally. So I start typically with explaining the difference between IAB and IAB Tech Lab. A lot of you are familiar with the IABs like IAB SEA, IAB Hong Kong, and other associations that where IAB is not present. They serve as part of the IAB, like the digital associations in Malaysia and Indonesia. So IAB typically will do the job of market development to support sales and marketing, whereas IAB Tech Lab, we work on technical standards to support the product development organizations within our member companies. So IAB will do things like education and certification. They will engage in research and drive public policy, create business standards and guidelines, and also engage in events and networking. Tech Lab, on the other hand, focuses more on standardized protocols and specifications, software and tools that the companies need, compliance programs to ensure that the standards and protocols are implemented correctly. And then we also support education and events to a little lesser extent than IABs. So how this helps you is that you can focus on your product and service development, operational innovation, and differentiation and competition with the help of the services that IAB and IAB Tech Lab provide to different teams in your organizations. In terms of our mission, we are trying to engage a member community globally so that we can share the cost and share the benefits. The objective being to develop foundation technologies and which are driven by members, which are developed with the help of the members and are broadly available by design. And then this is to create trust and growth in the digital media ecosystem. So we ourselves are a very neutral, transparent, open source nonprofit organization. So that's our mission: share the costs, share the benefits, have members drive all of the work that we do, make it available broadly to everyone, and act as a neutral, transparent, open source organization. So what we really do are technical standards, which, to explain this in a simpler way, like these are some of the standards that you're familiar with, like USB or a Wi-Fi or a Bluetooth, that you know allow your devices to connect with each other. What Tech Lab standards are similar, that they are for the digital media. And as a snapshot, like we try to do the same thing that these standards do for hardware. We try to provide scale so you can reduce their engineering costs, so that you can innovate and improve the quality and interoperability. And then you can grow faster because of the interoperability and other capabilities provided by the standards. This is a snapshot of some of the standards that you may be aware of, like OpenRTB, or the standards for video, or the Open Measurement SDK, MRAID for mobile, which we'll talk about more later on all of these. And then the Transparency and Consent Framework that we created to address the GDPR in Europe, or the CCPA for the California privacy law. So moving on from here, this is a much more consolidated view of actual standards. We kind of work in 4 areas or 4 business challenges that we try to address through our standards. The first one being the identity, data, and privacy. And then under that, we have Project REACT. That's a global project to address 2 things, mainly addressability and accountability. And besides that, we have data label or data transparency, the Transparency and Consent Framework, the CCPA framework, and audience taxonomies. Under brand safety and ad fraud, we address mainly the programmatic supply chain through standards like AdsDXT, Cirrus JSON, supply chain object, and of course, brand safety, we have taxonomies to address brand safety. Under ad experiences measure, which is where we'll talk about more today, I've highlighted as we have the VAST standard for delivery, the SIMID standard for video interactivity, MRAID is for the mobile in-app advertising, the Open Measurement SDK. We also address the podcast measurement metrics, and then we have new ad portfolio for the ad specifications, and then the safe frames as a secure ad container on the client side. And then we also have standards for programmatic effectiveness that are need no introduction, that are very well known. OpenRTB is the default standard for transacting and programmatic, and OpenDirect is the standard for programmatic guaranteed for direct source to automate that process. And then we have introduced some new standards like Ad Management API, CAPS, and a newer version of OpenRTB. Besides that, we do introduce guidances from time to time so that you can address, they can be used in the programmatic transactions and improve the efficacy of those transactions. For example, the CTV and the OTP guidance, the IFA guidance, the user agent guidance, the App Store bundle ID guidance. We also maintain a product called Spiders and Bots, traffic detection and filtering lists for IVT purposes. And then we also have a working group that addresses emerging technologies, like right now it's focused on blockchain or distributed ledger technologies, as well as cryptography. So that's kind of a snapshot in a brief all the work that we are doing for the industry today. We work, like I said, we are a global body. Our charter is global. We are not restricted to a country. Just like the typical ID is mostly for a country or a region. So we have about 750 plus companies as our members, 30 working groups, and we engage annually with 2,000 in all of those working groups. This is a snapshot of how we are managed. With our board of directors represents all the leading companies that are in the ad tech and the media and the advertising industry. This is just walk through some of 2-3 of our standards, which are very popular and very well adopted. Ads.txt has been adopted by millions of websites. Similarly, sellers.json, which was an accompanying standard that was adopted by 150 plus companies in less than 6 months. And Open Measurement SDK, we have certified 80 plus OM SDK implementations. And I've just highlighted the companies from the APAC region who have already integrated and certified, which is about 20 plus out of that. And then this is a snapshot of our podcast. Some of the leading broadcasters and leading podcast platforms have adopted the podcast metrics and compliance programs. A little bit about how we work, and then we'll get into the real content that everyone's probably here for. So at the top, like I said, we have the Tech Lab board. Under the Tech Lab board, we have working groups. Some working groups have commit groups to manage and to govern for the governance purpose of, especially if there's a software or that is to be managed, then we have commit groups. And then we have the Tech Lab team, that is us, who are assigned to some of one or more of these working groups. And our job is to facilitate the process of the discussion of the requirements and of releasing and packaging the standard or the protocol. And sometimes we do create subgroups when we need detailed discussions and more deep dives into specific topics. So with that, we will get into the topics for today. So I'll first address the mobile part. So in mobile, I'm just going to talk about MRAID. That's kind of has been our flagship standard for since about 2011. That's the default standard for all SDKs to deliver in-app advertising. It was basically designed to allow an ad to develop once and run everywhere, so that one ad creative could run across Android and iOS devices both. And the main purpose was for it to be able to carry out rich media functions like expansions or some other features, and access some of the APIs of the native platforms without having to write custom code for each of those. So I won't go into all the details of MRAID, but I'll just talk about the 3.0, which is the latest version, and some of the key features that we introduced in this version. So one, of course, we added the viewability API so that the creative can understand exactly where on the screen the creative is, and then they can decide what kind of rendering they need to execute. And that measures the exposure percentage, the add rectangle, any obstructions, and it is completely aligned to the Open Measurement SDK. So whatever the creative sees is what will get reported as measurement. The next one, we introduced the audibility API because user device volume control and understanding whether user is actually listening to the ad, especially if it's a video ad asset. It was a very important requirement for advertisers. So we introduced that. And then we introduced a lot of the user experience level features in MRAID 3.0. One was to introduce environment variables that a creative code needs, or creative needs to understand what to show to the user and how to render it so that it can happen much more quickly. And of course, things like, COPPA, which is more a US-based rule for child advertising. And then things like ad ready to render, messaging to the app, especially for those ads that are preloaded. And then some more clarifications and removing some ambiguity around what happens when you use close, when you resize, when the orientation changes with the phone. So those improvements on the user experience. And then we changed the specification for identifying and declaring location to match the OpenRTB format. So it's easy and it's aligned with the other standards. And also build in checks if the user allows location for the app, only then the ad is allowed to use the location, and improve that user experience where you don't have to pop up multiple pop-ups to understand the location to use in an ad. And all of this is in control of the app or the publisher. So those were the key features for MRAID. We'll now get into more on the video side. So I'll hand it over to Mike.
Thanks, Shelly. Hi, everyone. I'm Mike. I joined the Tech Lab in February of this year, and I am heading up the experiences, which encompasses a lot of the video standards, as well as the podcast standards. So heading up the video and CTV working groups, as well as the podcast working groups. Right now, I'm going to run you through a quick overview of some of our video standards, and then a little bit later, I'll touch on some of the podcast standards. So for pretty much any ad execution, there's sort of these three basic level industry requirements of delivery, verification, and interactivity. Next slide. So this is sort of just a quick sort of history of some of the video standards that we've developed. So previously, VAST relied on multiple standards for for delivery, relied on multiple standards, as well as verification and interactivity. Delivery was VAST, VPAID, as well as some custom integrations. Verification relied on VPAID and MRAID for mobile. Interactivity relied on VPAID and some custom integrations. And so actually, let's go to the next slide. And so there were also some additional challenges specific to mobile. Verification required native SDK integrations. There was limited support for VPAID. MRAID doesn't support all the requirements necessary. It's hard to scale with proprietary SDKs, and VPAID isn't liked by the publishers because it allows for unknown code to run and requires the control of the playback to be managed by VPAID. So the Tech Lab has worked to simplify these workflows by effectively, looking to minimize the amount of standards that are required to meet these requirements. So, we've streamlined the standards to simplify video advertising. In the past, it took the support of multiple standards, as I mentioned before, to meet these three requirements. And now in the present, each requirement can be handled by a single standard. So delivery, you can see, took those VAST, VPAID, and custom tags, and now is managed by VAST 4. Verification was looking at VPAID, MRAID, and VAST extensions, is now managed by Open Measurement SDK. and interactivity, which was primarily VPAID and custom SDK tags, is now handled by SIMID or VAST interactive templates. Along with VAST 4, we added a number of features to modernize delivery, introduced mezzanine and ready-to-serve files that allow for delivery of appropriate quality, which depends on the size of the screen and network capabilities. SSAI can send tracking on players' behalf using beacons and HTTP header guidance to improve transparency, as well as prevent ad fraud. Verification support is handled by Open Measurement, so there's no unknown JavaScripts. SIMID handles interactivity. Again, it's secure, which is preferred over VPAID. We've got some new interactive templates, which require only visual assets, such as images and CSS, and some instructions from metadata that's passed in the VAST tag, which are publisher implemented. I think next slide. Add request macros enable better delivery by communicating all sorts of various data points that are useful. Universal ad ID assists in tracking creative across various systems. Audio ads are now, rather than using a separate DAS spec, that DAS has been merged into BAS, and so now BAS can be used for audio ad delivery. Limit on wrappers for a better user experience. So VAST now has some guidance on limiting to 5 wrappers before returning an inline response for the best user experience to reduce latency. Closed captioning is now standardized as well for accessibility. And now we'll take a look at SIMID, which is replacing VPAID. SIMID is basically the separation of the interactive layer from the media asset, and it addresses how the media player and the interactive layer communicate using an API. It's sandbox execution and has no access to the player, so it's safe and secure. Publisher maintains control of the playback. Pre-cache assets are better user experience, reduces latency, and SSAI is capable with SIMID, which was not capable previously with VPAID. Error control, ad creative, error has no impact on the player site or the user experience of the content. Native browser APIs, as long as the publisher can load HTML and communicate with it over the standard post message API, it can support SIMID. Audio ads enable creative execution with audio ads. There's no creative wrapping for a better user experience. And the player can be native or web as long as SIMID Creative has sandbox DOM access. And I think that's it for video for now. So I'll be back a little bit later to talk about podcasts.
All right. Thank you, Mike. We do have some questions that I thought might be okay to take a quick small break and answer those questions. I think the first one is basically asking for Shiven's and my email, and I can actually type that in. It is not confidential. You're welcome to contact us. The next question I think is for Mike. Is VPAID supported in the CTV ecosystem? Mike or anyone can answer that.
Yeah, my understanding is that VPAID is typically not supported in CTV environments because it requires the execution of JavaScript. I don't know if Amit wants to add more color to that or any nuances that I might be missing here.
I would say that's actually one of the big drivers of why we have been looking at replacing VPAID with Open Measurement and SIMID, right? We are, I mean, even Open Measurement, we don't have a CTV SDK yet, but that's something that is something we are actively working on, a set of SDKs for CTV environments. And even SIMID gives the, even though there are no implementations right now, it has been designed with CTV in mind to be able to layer on top of SSAI environments. So yeah, the simple answer is no, VPAID doesn't support it, but we have plans with Open Measurement and SIMID to support CTV better.
And even in the mobile app ecosystem, VPAID was not supported. We did have a VPAID addendum to MRAID, but it was a very, very small percentage, like low single digits, that had actually enabled or were supporting VPAID.
That's a great point. It's the same problem there too.
Yeah.
Actually, slight similar problems, but not. It's worse in CTV because a lot of CTV environments don't have script JavaScript, for example.
Right. So I think we'll carry on with the presentation. So let's talk about the OM SDK. So OM SDK is basically a single integration for app developers to enable measurement by leading third-party providers, which basically the objective was to bring scale and consistency to mobile in-app advertising by offering an easier path to enabling measurement. One of the problems was that measurement inside a mobile app requires native code to execute. And each of the measurement providers were working with different advertisers, and they had developed their own proprietary code. So if an app developer wanted to, say, get an advertisement for Procter & Gamble and get an ad from Unilever, they would have to basically, and if Unilever and Procter & Gamble had different measurement providers, they would have to include two SDKs in their app to be able to support doing business with those two. So that's the problem essentially that we solved with this, was that now they don't have to, they can just include one SDK, Open Measurement SDK, and both measurement providers can get the signal. In parallel, the other problem it solved was the consistency, because now we have the standard API, we have the standard set of signals that everybody gets. So everybody is getting the same type of data and reducing the discrepancies in the market. How it works is basically the app developer or the ads monetization SDK of the app developer would implement the OM SDK that runs on every ad session. And through the OMID API, which is the bridge, the measurement provider's ad tag can collect all the signals that it needs and takes it back to their servers, and then they can do their own processing and run their own proprietary algorithms to provide a final decision to the advertisers. Some of the benefits I kind of laid out: it replaces multiple verification SDKs, increases access to supply and flexibility for buyers, and provides the transparency and consistency and the dependability that it's always available solution for every campaign. This is one of the working groups which has a commit group to manage the roadmap. So Google, Nielsen, Double Verify, Integral Ad Sciences, Oracle's Mode, and Pandora are the companies that are running the commit group. They also provide all the engineering resources and the ability for us to financial help so that we can distribute the software for free for everyone. And they've been the big contributors in developing the software. So the objective with OM SDK is to create like full cross-screen coverage by 2021. So we started with like mobile apps, initially iOS and Android in 2018. And then we are now moving to mobile apps and web browsers in 2020. And then the objective is to go to CTV in 2021. What we have planned for is and designed for right now is iOS, that is the TV OS, and then the Android TV that would cover devices like Chromecast and Fire TV and any other Android-based set-top device that's connected to a television, and then the Roku platform. And of course, we'll plan for others in future, but this has already been confirmed, and we are working towards these three for 2021. It's a very simple architecture. It's a two-layer architecture. That's what we have for open measurement. So the OMID API is the consistent layer that stays the same. It does change a little bit based on the platform, but that's the one that allows a consistent relay of the signals that are needed to do the measurement. And then we build the underlying SDKs like Android, iOS, web video, and then the connected TV platforms. The implementation is pretty simple. if a publisher has their own monetization stack, then they can they can implement it on their own, and all they have to do is make sure that's initiated on an ad session, OMID API is enabled, and then the measurement provider stack will do the rest. And it can also be implemented by an ad network, or what are typically known as ads SDKs. They can integrate it, and then it'll be available to all the apps that they integrate with. And I think I did forget to turn on my video. So I just quickly, I'll go through some of the capabilities and limitations so that you understand the scope and what it can and cannot do. So we cover all the ad session data, like when did the ad session start, when did it finish, was the ad actually loaded, and then what kind of impression was it. So begin to render is a standard definition, which basically signals that the ad assets were actually there and it actually started painting the ad on the screen. That is always measured, but publishers have the capability to declare other impression types and trigger those. And then today we cover all the major creative types, so display, native, video, and audio. And then we have 3 session types, the native sessions, and sometimes people create a web browser inside an app, so HTML sessions, and some have dynamic JavaScript enabled web views, so the JavaScript sessions. We do track the interactions like click and invitation to interact with an ad, like an expansion or any other creative element. And of course, geometry, that's kind of was the main purpose of the OM SDK to calculate viewability. So as part of geometry, we capture the viewport, the container, the ad view, the actual ad rectangle, any obstructions that are obstructing the ad. We do have friendly obstructions capability. So if there are, a player control or a transparent layer for some other purpose that needs to be declared as a friendly obstruction, that capability is there. And then it does calculate the percentage in view on the screen. And for video, we do the standard VAST events like start, stop, pause, resume, quartiles, player states, normal to expanded to collapsed, and we capture the volume change for both the device and the player volume. So those are the capabilities today. And then these are some of the limitations. So there's no logic in OM SDK for performing a brand safety. This is done by the verifications provider stack. They use either JavaScript or other methods, which are mostly proprietary with them. But we are developing a mechanism to allow the blocking or swapping of an ad because of brand safety. So that's coming in 2021. But still, we won't do the determination. The determination still needs to be done by the measurement provider. And then we have the fraud and IVT detection. That's another thing that OM SDK does not do. It is, again, something that the verification provider is responsible. And then we do not collect IDFA or any sort of user ID. There's no retrieval logic in OM SDK. So it's good. It's good in a way that we're not affected by any of the changes on privacy, because there is no PII information that's collected by the SDK. And with that, I will hand over to Mike to go over the podcast metrics.
All right. Okay, so in 2016, the Podcast Technical Working Group developed the first version of the podcast measurement guidelines. Due to the manner that podcasts are consumed, primarily from downloading a file from an RSS feed, the focus was primarily on server-side measurement. And the guidelines define standard metrics for podcast content and ads. The guidelines provide a recommended process for calculating metrics. They offer support for programmatic direct advertising and allow for flexibility in order to promote innovation. They provide a recommended process for generating audience and download metrics with details on filtering for uniqueness, eliminating preload requests, eliminating potential bots and more best practices. Though the current document focuses primarily on solutions for server-side measurement, future work is going to be focused on looking for solutions for client-side measurement. Relying on server-side measurement has meant addressing a number of unique challenges. Analysis is applied to server logs and most often not necessarily in real time. Understanding precisely when a play has occurred is difficult because the medium is based on complete or partial file downloads. And there's a general lack of cookies or IFA identifiers, so targeting, frequency capping, and rotation can be challenging. There's a number of other complexities that contribute to server-side measurement, such as head requests, which are typically used for checking changes and can't really be used for measurement since useful data isn't transferred in the head request. Behavioral differences across various players and versions of players, how to address bad actors and fraud in non-real time, and integrating with services that cache and stream can also be challenging. Next slide, please. Let's take a look at what's contained in the guidelines. The core metrics are identified within the guidelines, and they're focused on content download, audience, and ad delivery. A download describes a unique file request that was downloaded and includes complete file downloads as well as partial downloads. The listener metric corresponds to data that represents a single user who has downloaded content. Listeners can be represented by a combination of IP address and user agent. The ad delivered metric is determined by server logs that show either all bytes of the ad file were sent or the bytes representing the portion of the podcast file that contained the ad file was downloaded. And client confirmed ad play refers to an ad that was able to prompt a tracking beacon from the client when the file was played. Though as mentioned previously, the majority of platforms do not have the technology for client-side counting. The guidelines also outline best practices in applying a process for filtering requests, recommended file threshold levels, how to identify unique downloads and listeners, how to generate metrics, and a recommendation to employ an ongoing process of self-auditing to ensure consistency and reliability. Next slide, please. Yeah, and so the guidelines have gone through a couple of updates, 1.0 in 2016, I think 2.0 came in 2017, I believe, and more recently, we just released some minor updates to the guidelines this month with version 2.1. The newest version includes a number of minor language updates for more specificity, as well as some guidance for user agent structure, as you can see an example here. It has recommendations for IPv6 IP addresses and how to handle those, since IP6 basically rotates through addresses throughout a day for any given device. And so it can be complicated in calculating listeners or unique listeners or downloads based off of that. So we have some new recommendations there. And then we also have a bunch of additional detail for podcast players listed below here. I don't need to kind of get into the details there. And then beyond that, we also issued some new guidance specific to Apple Watch OS, which has some erroneous automatic downloads. And so we've issued guidance there that can be updated depending on whether or not Apple makes updates in the future. The ultimate goal is to provide further consistency in the adoption of the standards across the industry. Next slide, please. The compliance program. In 2018, the Tech Lab rolled out a compliance program for podcasts. The program aims to ensure adherence to the guidelines using a common set of metrics defined in the document. With wide adoption, the compliance program helps to provide reassurance and confidence in the metrics being reported. Companies that successfully complete the certification process receive the IAB Tech Lab seal of approval and are listed as compliant on the Tech Lab website. Next slide. To gain certification, organizations go through a 4-step process in which the IAB Tech Lab audits data samples, validates data queries, and evaluates business processes. The audit checks to ensure adherence to the measurement guidelines following the guidance in calculating the key metrics listed here. And to date, the compliance program has been pretty successful with over 15 major podcast publishers, platforms, and ad tech companies that have completed the process and received certification. And I think that's it.
Amit, will you take
Over to
over?
Amit. Over to Amit for the iOS.
Yes. So I'll be giving a very quick overview of one of the probably one of the most one of the efforts that people have been most interested in recent times, and that's related to the iOS 14 updates, where Apple introduced a number of changes related to privacy and advertising. The changes that they introduced are listed over here. You have the changes to the IDFA and the and some concepts around the IDFA itself, right? So basically, the fact that they want apps to actually ask for permission on a regular basis for the usage of IDFA. In addition to that, there's also more details around the privacy transparency in the App Store. You can get a lot more detail about the privacy information for every app in the App Store. You also have a different mechanism to do app install attribution. So basically, an Apple defined a process, which is something that I'm going to talk about in a little bit more in a second. But basically, something that goes a little more towards aggregated attribution rather than an individual real-time attribution that people are used to. So that is a change that's coming up, and also a couple of other updates around geolocation and privacy report and such. Can you go to the next slide, Sherry? So there have been a number of takes on this across the industry. I figured I'll just put some of those in here and talk to them. First of all, it's definitely good to see the emphasis on user privacy. That's definitely a positive. But on the other hand, there is also the fear of change, right? So it is definitely a lot of folks feel like it's the end of the IDFA and attribution as we know it on iOS. Because of the extent of the changes that are in there. There have been discussions about having workarounds, which are unlikely given that Apple has given guidance that you cannot really work around it if a user says no to the IDFA request. You're not supposed to use your own other mechanism if that's the case. And there's definitely a lot of discussion around contextual targeting picking up a lot more interest because of the changes to the IDFA and the limits on user tracking, really. Now, of course, the other big problem really is around consent fatigue, right? So you have all these different mechanisms around GDPR, TCF, and so on that already are talking about asking the user permission for managing their privacy, and there's been a lot of concern that Apple has not been a part of those conversations and doing things on their own and in a proprietary manner, which is always challenging and requires iOS specific implementations. But so that's a general view that we've been hearing, and there are a couple of things that we are doing at the Tech Lab. One of which, and I highly recommend everyone join in there if you're interested in this topic, is Project Rearc. That's the discussion around privacy and attribution, mainly initially focused on the cookieless world, if you will, changes around third-party cookies that are coming up, but it's become a much more wider discussion, and so I highly recommend joining that. The second piece is something that I'll talk about next. Shelly, to the next slide. So we did release a number of OpenRTB related updates tied to the IDFA and SKAD network changes. The first is an extension to support parsing of the IDFV and the more detailed authorization status around the IDFA. So that's a very minor change, but it's important to be able to communicate that status. The second piece is around the SKAD network support. So Apple defined a lot of details around how the SKAD network ID should be used for attribution, but their focus there was on the device side itself and what the app should be doing. But the rest of the things is what we are focused on in this blog post and the extension where you can read more details. But it basically comes down to having an extension on the bid request and the response around SKAD network IDs. So you can pass, you can let the for any given impression, you can now inform the buyers which IDs can be used for that particular publisher, and then have correspondingly so that the buyers can know where they're going to be able to use get more attribution information around that. And then we also have a related proposal that we're working through right now. The spec actually is ready, but the tool itself, and this is around managing the ID list a little more efficiently than passing the entire list of IDs in every bid request. So that part, the spec is ready, but the tool itself is going to be ready in Q1. We're shooting for that to be ready in Q1 of 2021. But basically, the IAB Tech Lab will be managing a list of SCAD network IDs for the people who need them. And you don't have to pass along the entire list as you communicate, and you just pass in, you pass in the set that you are interested in by the size of the list, and then have exclusions for the ones that you don't support, things like that. So all those details are in that extension on GitHub, and also the blog post is a very good resource that you can use to use for more information. So I'll stop there. I know that's a very quick overview, but hopefully that'll give you some good initial thoughts, and you can always reach out to us for more information.
Yes, so please, guys, if you have any questions, please keep putting on the questions. We'll take up the questions at the end. But welcome Kiranjit. So now let's welcome Kiranjit. Kiranjit is, as I had introduced, he's the Vice President, Group Head and Vehicle Monetization at Gojek, and also the Director on Promogo. Gojek Promogo has been a member of IAB Tech Lab and has recently implemented the OM SDK. So over to you, Kiranjit, to talk about your experience with IAB Tech Lab.
Hi, hello, Shivendra. Hi, Shaila and the rest of the panel members, and a big welcome to all the attendees. I don't think I have to give a further introduction, but thank you for having me. Some context as to how this association or membership with IAB Tech Lab unearthed for us. So for context, at Gojek, we have a stealth startup, which is a subsidiary company called Promogo. And essentially our mandate is to build out a digital out-of-home ecosystem. I'm not sure how many of you on the call understand Gojek as a business, but essentially we are like 3 different super apps that aggregate orders for drivers. So that's one part of our ecosystem. The second part is for our merchants. So the merchant super app, where anybody who's a small business who is either selling food, groceries, or anything that can be aggregated on our app has the capabilities to get access to a point of sale system, etc. And of course, the consumer app, where the services provided by both drivers and merchants are aggregated on whole. Going through a very rigorous commercial process, we found an opportunity for the out-of-home industry. Why so was the accessibility and barriers to entry for any brand was very sophisticated to advertise in OOH. Why? The barriers to entry included high price ranges, a lot of ambiguity around effectiveness, and most importantly, the OOH industry has been dominated by the largest brands in the world. The reasons for that, again, is accounted to sophistication and the reach and understanding of awareness. Now, going through this thought process, making OOH inventory programmatic in real time, ensuring that we have some form of measurement to give CMOs the ability to measure their return on investment was very important to us, and forming a part of that process in building a product. So we put on a digital smart screen on a motorbike that effectively gives us reach and awareness at a hyperlocal level. Now, where OM SDK or IAB Tech Lab in particular came in was, if we have a look at global macro trends in digital, be it out of home or in app, credibility was something that was an answer that many couldn't provide. So if a brand were to ask us, how do we know that on a motorbike in the middle of Jakarta, if our ad was in fact rendered? So we went across this fact finding, working with our product managers and tech people to kind of understand what is available out there, what's transparent, what's collaborative, and most importantly, what are standards that are adopted by brands quite in a unified manner. And we came across IAB Tech Lab, and I think our tech team participates. I think, as you all understand how it works, is our tech people would, or engineers would build code and contribute towards the ecosystem at IAB Tech Lab, which in turn gave us the OM SDK certification for our product. I think, Shaile, correct me if I'm wrong, but first in the world for DOOH?
For OOH, yes.
For OOH, so for out-of-home advertising in the digital space, we are pioneers. And yeah, it was super cool. I remember back in, was it March, Shaile, when you and I were talking about the benefits and how we got there. And I think between March and October, when we launched the product, we had fully completed the certification process. It was pretty seamless. Yeah, it's appreciated and definitely measured, especially for our smaller brands who are less sophisticated and want to have certain comfort. Of course, questions around brand safety, return on investment, etc. For us, the OM SDK is credibility. It's being able to provide brands that safe space, that if they're spending on our platform to acquire certain reach or awareness for their product, that we are actually delivering against their promises. Because again, it's very easy to get muddled if certain things aren't verified. So from Gojek's perspective, it's been a net positive partnership, and we look forward to working with them much further as we go along. We also have access to their to IAB Tech Lab's working groups across multiple different disciplines, including things like brand safety, programmatic infrastructure. So it actually gives a lot of, not hope, but it gives a lot of ideation into our product road mapping and prioritization. When we work with these working groups, it gives us an understanding, and that peers in the industry who are participating there as well, a platform to engage, right? So many a time, partners or brands or media owners don't get a platform to kind of share and engage with each other on best practices. So I think coming together and having that platform, especially for the engineers who are, they're very focused, right? Our tech and engineering crew are laser focused on delivering against their P0 priorities. And they don't get much engagement outside their course of work or their peers at work. And having such a platform, feedback that I've received from the team is that it's been very, very positive. So Shaile, I hope that kind of covers our partnership between IAB Tech Lab and Gojek.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you, Kiran.
Most welcome. Thank you for having me.
Yeah.
Thanks a lot, Kiranjit. Really appreciate you. And I'll just pop on to the next slide from there, where exactly how kind of Kiranjit explained. So how do you engage with IAB Tech Lab? And very frankly, there are already core group which is in flight. So there are several topics which are already in flight where we have these core working groups. So please understand, while networking and other things occur around this, we are a very laser focused, as we say, policy, standard, and tech assets delivery group, and slightly geeky, if that could be the best word to kind of describe us. And though there are these core groups on various topics, and if you go to IAB Tech Lab /solutions, that's a very good page for the reference to give you an overview of all the kind of work that we are doing. And what we intend in Asia Pacific and around the world is to start similar, working groups. And these working groups ultimately will work along with the core working groups. There might be stuff or assets that have been already built and we need customizations, or we need certain extensions that can be needed for local geographies. We would be able, so the local working groups will be able to contribute through that. And in course of time, the local working groups will become core working groups based on the kind of topic we pick up and which is of global importance. And we may find that companies in Asia Pacific or companies in Europe or wherever across the world have more talent to be able to lead that stuff. So it's just a cycle of maturity that we want to do. And this is a long journey. This is not a journey of 1 month, 2 months. over a course of years, our vision is that there will be certain core working groups working out of the Asia Pacific region. To make this happen, I'll just give you Shelley, the next slide. I'll just try to give you an idea of what we are trying to do. What we are trying to do is we are forming 3 layers of engagement with you all. The first is a communication group. So already you are part of our communication groups. So there will be regular set of emails that will go out to you, communication that will tell you of what things are happening, what blogs that we are writing, what are the activities that are happening in Asia Pacific, and any webinars or any engagements or events that we are holding in the Asia Pacific. And similarly, what we mean is at some part in the next quarter of the next year, we would like to, by invitation, get a few thought leaders from this industry in Asia Pacific and ask them to start prioritizing the issues, all global issues and local issues, in terms of where we can contribute. So therefore, we'll be able to build a kind of priority list of things that we would like to work. And in collaboration with core working group, we can identify the areas that these are the stuff that local talent or people from the region of Asia Pacific can itself work on. And that when this group or the topics have been decided, we reach the third stage where technical working groups would be formed. The technical working groups would be open only to the members, and the technical working groups will start attacking the specific technical issues, the specific assets that need to be customized or built from rock bottom. So basically what we want is everybody of you to be part of our communication groups and start communicating. You have Shelley's and mine email, and we would pick up some of you as part of our thought leadership who would be able to identify the issues for Asia Pacific, and that will lead to the technical working groups where we actually bunker down and solve a set of problems. Now I would kind of open everybody to any questions that you have, questions to Mike, questions to Shelley, questions to Amit, questions to Kiranjit or me about anything that we have learned. And just before something that we have a third session that's coming on 21st of January in 2021, in which we would kind of cover the open transparency and ad fraud kind of topic, where we have assets from IAB Tech Lab which are relevant to you all. Questions, please. Shelley, are there any questions?
Yeah, there are a few questions. The first one is, do you work with Metrological, which is owned by Comcast, which allows apps to sit on their connected set-top box? I have not, we have not interacted with them. So Comcast itself is a member, NBC is a member, of the parent and sister companies. But definitely if you send us an email with the link where we can learn more, we can definitely explore what Metrological does and does it fit into our product roadmap. Amit, have you heard of Metrological at all before?
I've not heard of Metrological, but just from a set-top box, just from a set-top box point of view, that is one of the things which a couple of companies have expressed interest in building support for. It basically comes down to two things, really, right? One is the actual what that looks like, just like we were talking about Roku and Apple TV and other things. Similarly, the question of what can be done on those set-top box operating systems, and the second is the actual mechanism of ad delivery, whether it's if it's using VAST and all those other things. Also, is the other part we've got to look at.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Okay, moving to the next question. With so much buzz around CTV, how is IAB Tech Lab prioritizing projects involving these large screens? So I think I can start with that, and maybe Amit. Or Amit, do you want to start? Like, you've written the whole blog on CTV.
Oh, sure. So CTV is definitely a big priority for us, and the blog that Shelley mentioned, we can probably add a link to that somewhere. But basically, it's a blog which kind of talks about the various aspects of delivery and brand safety and measurement and all that on CTV. Prioritizing it, we have a subgroup that of open measurement that's focused on CTV, and I think they're right now looking at the Apple TV, Android TV, and Roku as some of the key platforms, right? At this point, I don't think we have a date just yet, but there's definitely something that we are actively working on.
Yeah, and CTV is kind of our, I'll actually add those slides also about 2021 priorities, which kind of just got approved last week by our board. And CTV is the #1 priority. Everything related to CTV, from delivery to measurement to server side and ad formats and everything that's included or required to deliver CTV advertising is #1 priority for 2021.
Right, and if you look at VAS4 and open measurement and SIMID and all that, is a lot of it is built based on the server-side ad insertion is probably the primary mechanism of ad delivery on CTV environments, and these new standards have all been built with that in mind. So that's one of the key things that we've been thinking about as we build those out.
Next question is probably for Mike, I guess. We were told that IPv6 does not support measuring video, audio, and apps. Is that true?
I'm not entirely sure what this question is getting at. I'm not sure how IP6 factors into measurement for video. Specifically, as far as I know, we don't have any explicit details around IP6 for video, but I think there are some implications that are carried over from the solutions that we're working on in the podcast group that will have implications for video use cases down the line. So we're currently sort of actually furthering development of the solution for IP6 for podcasts right now, actually, as we speak, sort of. And so in the next the final version of the guidelines 2.1 that I mentioned previously, we'll have actually refined guidance for that there. If this is sort of a proof of concept, and if it works well and we don't and we get positive feedback around it, then it's likely that we'll be able to look to that as sort of guidance for solutions for video. I don't know if that answers the question or not.
Yeah, and isn't that like I mean, it's IPv6 is not changing your HTTP or your HTML standards. So everything else that works there remains same. One of the things that IPv6 does is it rotates the IP address frequently. Like in IPv4, it's one single IP address for a considerably long period of time. In IPv6, it's much more frequently rotated. So if you're counting things, or if you're basing anything based on an IP address as one of the variables in your equation or your algorithm, then of course it's going to disturb that.
Right. I think that might be the source of that question. Actually, if you pose that question, if you want to send us an email again with more details, that'd be great. But I suspect that Shelly, what he just said is probably the source, and is also what is tied to the podcast side, right? Podcast measurement has all been based on server-side analytics, and that's the reason why the IP address does matter over there. But in general, in digital media, I would think that it's not as relevant, right?
Right, and then we have one more question. Is IAB Tech Lab involved in publishing reports and digital edX like the way you do in US along with PwC? So like I said in my opening slides, I'd mentioned like research and this kind of the data collection, etc., is something that the IABs do. So somebody like an IAB Southeast Asia would be doing this. We do not usually engage in this, but if there is a strong demand in the region for this and nobody is doing it, we would be happy to listen and see if we can do this kind of work. But typically that's not in our charter. And that was the last question.
To reemphasize again, we have another webinar coming up on 21st of January 2021. And further to that, as most of you would become part of our communication groups, we'll start rolling out the calendar for the entire first quarter of next year. What we are proposing to do is possibly do a much more deep dive kind of sessions for some of these topics, because you understand this, we tried to cover 4,500 hours in 45 minutes this time. And all of these, and you are welcome to please go to the IAB Tech Lab website. There is enormous amount of blog, there is enormous amount of documents available free at this point of time, which you can refer. And then that in itself is an engagement we would want from you. And looking forward to seeing you all in the next year. And hopefully this Thursday morning slot works better. So 21st January is a Thursday morning slot again.
And yeah, just want to end it with like, if you have any questions about any of our standards or products or services, you can just shoot an email to support@iabtechlab.com, and we'll make sure it gets answered from there.
And Shelly, have you put in the email of ours on the?
Yeah, I'll modify this this deck to include the CTV blog that Amit has written, that link, and then the 2021 priorities, and then we will share this with everybody by Friday, I think, this Friday, and the recording.
Yes, we are doing a recording, and we will share the recording of the last time and this time too with everybody of you, so that you can even circulate to your colleagues and partners who might be interested in this topic. So signing off this year. Happy holidays, and hope you all have a great end of the year, and looking forward to being, meeting you all again in January.
Thank you. And thank you, Kiran, once again for making the time.
Most welcome, everyone. Have a good one. Happy holidays. Bye.